Hi, my name is Abraham Badu Tewia. Today, I wanted to make a short video about mental health and student learning. If there's one thing I have learned from the current or the immediate past COVID pandemic, I know that mental health is a big issue among students. After all, who can learn without a good mental health? I do not have a degree in psychology, but I have watched many students, hundreds of them, and I've worked with them, and I've watched some of them suffer greatly and because of mental health problems. In fact, I had a student whose parents, one of them were from Ukraine, another was from Russia. So when the Ukraine-Russia war broke, she suffered greatly from mental health, and her studies also crumbled. So I thought I would make this video and offer some advice on how students can improve their mental health, and in so doing, help them to succeed in their learning journey. Again, I don't have a degree in mental health, but I have suffered some mental health myself. I grew up in the rural part of Ghana, and when you grew up in Africa in such environments, it's quite difficult. In fact, in my case, just about when I was going to finish high school, as secondary school, I had a brother who was only 24 years old die. And in fact, at that time, I didn't even know what mental health is. And that really caused a great pain and a great mental health crisis for me. In fact, I grieved for almost 2 years. That was when I had just begun college. And in that 2 years, my grades were not great. And so despite the challenges that I faced during that period, I managed to develop an overall positive attitude on life. And it is this overall attitude, positive attitude, that helped me to get to Purdue, do my PhD, and later on go to Harvard to do my postdoctoral studies. In my current job, I mentor high school students, undergraduate students, and even postdocs. And after working with so many of them, there's one thing I have learned, and I want to kind of discuss this before I jump onto how students can improve their mental health. So stay with me for a moment. The one thing I have learned is that the majority of the students are very smart. In fact, they have the mental capacity to actually understand most things taught to them. The problem is most of them do not know how to relate what they already know to solve problems, either in exams or even in real world. So you can say most of the students lack experience. And because most students are afraid to fail, they typically don't get the experience that they need early on in time before they need that experience. I don't know if that makes sense. They postpone getting the experience that they need to do well when the time comes. So because of that, though they are smart, most of them don't do well, in the long term. So, thinking about this, for the past almost 7 years, I've been trying to develop what I call science in a reverse. I thought that if I can reverse the way that learning is done, that could help students to obtain the experience they need in time before the crisis begins. And so let me illustrate what I mean by science in reverse or learning in reverse. What I mean is that for most of the time when you're writing, say, a letter to someone, we typically write from our own perspective. Okay, I sit down and I write what I want to tell the person from my perspective. Now imagine putting yourself in the person's shoes and writing from the perspective of the person in the reverse. If you can consider what the person is going through, if you can consider what the person might need and write from that perspective, we can do a whole lot better. We can remove a lot of stress through that means of communication. So what I ended up doing in order to achieve this science in the reverse is to have students learn from people with similar experience or people that that have similar background. For example, Black professors teaching Black students. And let me illustrate what I mean also, using this pi symbol. Here is the original pi symbol. There is a relatively new way of teaching called the flipped classroom, where the classroom is inverted. Okay, so traditionally, the student will come to classroom, learn the material, go home, and do homework. The flipped classroom proposes for the student to do the homework first, then come to classroom for a discussion. That is great, but that is not what I mean by reverse. In fact, when you reverse, the image is not inverted. It is a mirror image. And so now imagine someone that looks very similar, almost a mirror image of the student, teaching the person using his or her own examples that the student will need, and using that example to teach the student. It releases stress, it improves mental health. In fact, this is not a new idea. In the US, women have been using this approach for a long time. In fact, today, women are not considered as minorities in the science field anymore, because for a long time, we've been using women as a representative for other women, for young women. So when young women see women professors, they intuitively believe that they can do it. And that psychological experience is what has broadened the number of female scientists in the 21st century. So what is different in what I'm proposing, or what I've proposed over the years, is again, use not only the mirror image, but also close the student-teacher gap. In other words, use a hierarchical engagement strategy where you take a postdoc and the closest student to the postdoc is a graduate student. Pair the postdoc with the graduate student and let the postdoc mentor the graduate student. The graduate student aspires to be like the postdoc. They are more attentive. They have questions they want to ask him or her, and that releases stress and the communication goes much more smoother. Use graduate students to mentor undergraduate students. Use undergraduate students to mentor high school students, and use high school students to mentor middle school students. Again, we are closing the student-teacher gap using the person who just experienced something. Let them use that experience in teaching the next lower student. When you create this opportunity, you're allowing them to be leaders. You're giving them classic opportunities to experience life. And the more they do this among themselves, the less stressful the process becomes. And so I've done this. Okay, so you might wonder, how does this science in the reverse relate to mental health and learning? So let me just summarize the points that I wanted to bring up from this science in the reverse. What I've said is that for students to learn properly, they must relate what they already know. They are smart, they know the things. They have to relate what they already know to solve problems. To do that, I'm saying that they need experience. What is standing in the way is a fear of failure. They don't want to fail. And so they prevent themselves from practicing what they already know and using it to solve the problems when the stakes are low. So now when they go to the exam, because they didn't practice, they can't actually solve it. They didn't get the experience in time before the exams. So what should we do? Create a community of people to help each other and practice what they already know. Okay, and by pairing them up, the highest to the next lowest one, the next lowest to the next lowest one, you allow students the opportunity to serve for themselves as teachers and mentors and gain the experience they need. So with this in mind, how does this relate to mental health? In fact, this community that we created, I kind of took it for granted. If it wasn't for COVID, I just thought, I'm just bringing students together and I'm teaching them here and there. But when COVID hit and we lost the sense of community, that's when I realized, whoa, we've taken this important aspect of a human life for granted. And so, yes, they need the community to maintain good health. And trust me, the mental health crisis is real. It's a big problem, and especially among students. And I'll say it again, who can learn without a good mental health? In fact, I had a student, an A student, he got an A in almost any class that he's taking. And just last week, in fact, the reason I decided to make this video, because just last week, this student comes to my office talking to me about his mental health problems and how he has to go home, to see his parents and just to cool off. And I was shocked. I mean, you of all people have mental health crisis. You know everything and you're doing everything right. Well, yes, it can happen to anybody. And so just to stress this point that mental health crisis is a real problem, let me use 2 slides to explain this. Suicide within the US is ranked among the top 10 causes of death. The main cause of suicide is untreated depression. In fact, it's known that about 75% of mental health problems will occur before the student or the person turns 24 years old. This years aligns pretty well in the post-high school years, where, as we all know, when the student is transitioning from the high school or the secondary school into the university level, it's a time for new experience. Who wants new experience? Everybody hates new experience. The stress that comes with the new experience. You are assigned with unfamiliar responsibilities, and you have to find a way to actually execute this responsibility assigned to you. There's also new and higher learning curves that the students must overcome. In fact, this is worst in Africa, especially for students who are taking the natural sciences, biology, physics, chemistry. Most of these students actually don't want to do that type of course. It was given to them because that course was available. And so the course, in inverted commas, have been imposed on them, okay, and they have to deal with it, and it's difficult. It's very stressful, and the depression can set in. And if you're not careful, it can go as long as even suicide. So yes, a lot of people, okay, about 43,000 people are dying annually, okay, out of suicide, which is related to depression in the US. And again, just to bring it home, not to scare you too much, to bring it home to students, yes, I want to show you one case study that was performed by Sarah Lipson and her co-workers in the Boston University. And these are experts, okay, they are in the School of Public Health. This study was performed just this year, okay, last month, and was published in the Journal of Affective Disorder. This was a national study. The study took place from 2013 all the way to 2021. They talked to about 350,000 students across 370 schools. So this is a massive study. What did they find? Well, they found that between the COVID era, 2020 and 2021, 60% of the students met one or more mental health criteria, which could be depression, anxiety, or suicidal ideations. They also learned that from the beginning of the study, about 50% of the students experienced increase, or a decrease, in mental health. And overall, over the 8 years of study, there were about 130% increase, in depression, and about 100% increase in anxiety among the students that they studied. And they made a point that, in fact, COVID is not the only factor that caused this increase. Remember, they started the study in 2013. It was almost 6 years before COVID. So this is a whole bunch of different reasons why the students experience all these mental health problems. I hope these help. As always, let me end by asking you to be kind to everyone because everyone is having a tough time.